So tonight we're picking up where we left off last time. We're in the section that's bringing us up to the bold judgments. Is really where we are, the vile judgments. And one of the things I want us to do, because usually this is where our language comes into a problem, because we call them often the bold judgments, but when we do that, we tend to think of our bowls kind of thing, and not. So for us, think of these more as saucers, like what you'd have where they collect. That's more what they are, just for a thing there. So right now, the focus here is actually in God's throne room. And we know that because when we started this, it says verse 2 of chapter 15, and I saw something like the sea of glass mingled with fire. And the last time we saw that was in God's throne room. If you try to remember the picture of God's throne room there, where you have the altar, you got the thrones with the elders on them. But here you've got close to the throne, and their idea are those who've had victory over the beast. And the reason that's significant is because coming out of the last chapters, which really kind of focused on what's taking place during this time, approximately times and half a time, or 3.5 years, in that time frame where the beasts have risen up, the Antichrist has taken power, you've got the false prophet, and the people are seeing the power of the beast and basically going, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? And you get the line where the beast has gotten so furious, and the dragon has, that they've lost access to the woman. He tried to consume the woman, but the earth opened up and swallowed his flood. And that's all imagery. And because he can't, then he says he goes after her offspring and to make war against them. And he's, from their perspective, he's conquering them. And then we got to ask, well, what's taking place? And so and that seems discouraging, but now we get the prelude to the bold judgments. And in that, what do we see? Well, the first thing it says, and I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with those, and I saw those who had victory over the beasts. And so who are these? These are those who've chosen Christ. These are the saints whom, from the world's perspective, are being defeated, but in actuality, from heaven's viewpoint, they're not. They're victorious. And why? Because, well, truthfully, what's the worst that the beast can do is, give them the first death. But then they can no longer touch them. And now they're alive in God's presence. And so they're victorious. And so they're there. We get a picture here. This is where you get that old picture of people sitting around with harps. Okay, this is where it is. Because it's what they're actually doing. Because it says they're there. They've had victory standing on the sea of glass, having harps of God. So they actually have harps that they're playing on. So I hope you get harp lessons. So they got the harps that are there and they're playing. So what we're going to be looking at is this song tonight. And it says, they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Now we're going to unpack that a little bit because it's a double thing here. So we're going to first go look at the song of Moses. So we're going to go all the way back to Exodus chapter 15. Exodus chapter 15. Now what you're doing. So Exodus 15, this is classified as the Song of Moses. Now, to understand this, and we're going to read it in a second, since it's in Exodus, we probably have a good idea of what the context around it is. This is after the victory in Egypt, the deliverance of the people, victory over, if you like, the Egyptian gods, and God proving his sovereignty. And now, they would sing this in the Sabbath. They'd actually sing it. And it would be sung in the afternoon service, and it would celebrate God's sovereign rule over the universe and his deliverance. As I said, they would sing this and it'd celebrate God's sovereign victory over the universe and the deliverance of his people from Egypt. But we'll spend some time. I'll just read the song of Moses here. So it says, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed the enemy in pieces. And in the greatness of your excellence, you have overthrown those who rose against you. You sent forth your wrath. It consumed them like stubble. And with the blast of your nostril, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright like a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall be satisfied on them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You, in your mercy, have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. The people will hear and be afraid. Sorrow will take hold of the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be dismayed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling, will take hold of them. All the inhabitants of Canaan will melt away. Fear and dread will fall on them. By the greatness of your arm, they will be as still as a stone. Till your people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over, whom you have purchased. You will bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. All right, that's the song of Moses. But if you look, there's a lot more there than just the victory over the Red Sea, or victory over the Egyptians in the Red Sea. That's mentioned here, but it is much broader than that. And its ultimate song, as I said, is really about God's victory over and his sovereignty over all things. And that becomes significant because if you remember that in Egypt, the Israelites were treated incredibly harshly. And it took God's mighty hand to deliver them. And so we see in this case, you see a parallel for God's people at the time. They're being persecuted. They're being dominated by this beast, yet it is God who's going to deliver them. And notice that it is clear that it's not just the Egyptians who are in the Song of Moses who are becoming afraid of this. It mentions Philistia, Edom, Moab, Canaan. They're all mentioned as well, that God's victory becomes universal. And in fact, when you look at the traveling of the Israelites, you can see where Moab gets afraid of them. And it starts to make sense that when Israel was just moving through the wilderness, they had to go near it and they say, hey, look, we just want to pass through. That's all we want. We won't do anything. If we drink any water, we'll pay for it. Anything that's used, we'll pay for it. We just want to pass through. And Moab's like, no, we don't want you to even come in our land. And why not? Because look what just happened in Egypt. And when the spies enter Canaan, what does Rahab say? We hear what your God has done, what he did to the kings on the other side of the Jordan, what he did to the Egyptians. They're petrified. And they understand that this is who God is, and this is what's taking place. And so here you have the saints. Now what's interesting about this is you've got the saints singing a song of God's deliverance, but it doesn't look like the Egyptian deliverance. It doesn't look like, hey, look, we were brought out of it and we escaped safely. No, from their perspective, they were crushed. They were executed. And yet, they're like, this is the victory. And they're singing this. And this is a song, as I said, that'd be sung constantly as a reminder in the synagogue of God's sovereignty. And this is what we're going to see. Now, they're singing this song as an introduction to the judgments that are really about to fall. And these judgments that are coming are far worse than the ones that have been before it. You go, how can that be? Well, as bad as the demonic locusts were, nobody died. And that seems strange to say, but that's exactly what the truth is. It says for that time frame, death was removed. They experienced the suffering of what it would be like, but they did not die. But then you've had, through this time frame, you had the other horsemen doing their work. Well, at the same time, you've got a beast system rising, and all that's going on. But the new judgments are going to be the real effect. And in fact, one of the ones that's going to come, when you start to compare these judgments, you're going to see a bit of a compare and contrast to the Egyptian judgments. Now, there's not 10 of them, but there's only, I know that it says 7, there's really 6 bold judgments. But you're going to hit things like darkness, you're going to hit like boils, you're going to hear blood, water turned to blood. These are all going to be in the bold judgments, and we'll look at these in a bit. But we're supposed to draw the connection. This isn't just random drawing together. This is exactly what is happening. God has revealed exactly what will take place, and he's done it multiple ways. He showed it in the past, and he will do it again. And this does show the sovereignty of God. And that's an important detail. And remember, that was the whole point when we looked at Daniel, to drive home that God is sovereign. So even as strong as the beast is going to seem that he is, the false prophet and the authority of the dragon, as much as that looks like it, they are still confined to the sovereignty of God. And so it does deal with that issue too. It's like, well, what about the wicked things that'll be done unto the saints on that time? From God's viewpoint, they're not defeated, as we've said, they're victorious. And so the believers, what do they trust in? In God's sovereignty, that they are secure in him. And now we run into this section here, the song that they're singing. It's not just the song of Moses, of that victory, but it also calls it the song of the Lamb. And as we look at it here, it's not long, but it just says, great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints. Who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. For all nations shall come and worship before you, for your judgments have been manifested. Now here's the thing about this. Almost every line of this song appears in the scriptures somewhere. It either appears in the Psalms or it appears in the prophets. And that's significant, because when you start to look at every single one of those and you start cross-referencing those, they all come from sections about God's work, his justice, his holiness, or worship. In other words, it's not just like, hey, I can find these lines in random spots. That would be insignificant. That's like saying, oh, this line here, oh, I can find that writing in Charles Dickens over here, and then I can find this in, a line in Harry Potter. No. Every single one of these lines appears in the scriptures, but they're always in connection with God's working, his sovereignty or his holiness. And that is important. So like, for example, great and marvelous are your works is a Psalm 102, Psalm 111, my mistake, Psalm 139, but it also appears in Amos chapter 4 in the midst of God's judgment. And so you get that, and then you've got cross-references. Those are just different references, but they also appear, like my Bible gives me cross-references all through it. So it shows me like Deuteronomy 32, and the Psalm 111 that I pointed out, also Psalm 139, which I pointed out, But I said it, Amos 4. Just and true are your way, O King of the saints, or King of the nations. Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 145, Jeremiah 10:7. God calls God King of the nations. As I said, these are all throughout it. And why this is so significant is not just because they're put together, but one of the things that I think people fall into this trap is we can think that, oh, the God of the Old Testament's not the God of the New, that God has changed. And this is one of the things where people arrive at these false assumptions, and where you put God the Father in contrast with God the Son, where God the Father, he's all about wrath, he's all about judgment, he's all about just pouring it out and making people punish. And then you got the Son, who's, he's the God of grace and love, and he's keeping the God of wrath at bay, kind of thing. Or another view that was through the ages was that God grew up. In other words, that God, when he was younger, he was impetuous, the impetuousness of youth, and he's quick to pour out his wrath. But then he got older, he got wiser, and he became more gentle and more kind and that kind of thing. You think of that image from a human standpoint. When we're young, trying to deal with children, we're like, I'm going to cut down on this. But as we get older, and as I'm not a grandparent anywhere near it, but the grandparents are like, hey, it's okay, it's fine. And how many times you think when you got older and you've watched your parents become grandparents, you're thinking, man, they're letting the grandkids get away with stuff they'd never let me get away with when I was kind of. So it's that kind of imagery that said, well, God grew up. God just got more mature. And those are viewpoints people have, but this is showing that, no, he is the same God. He hasn't changed. And not to mention that this is the song of the Lamb, not just the song of what you play God the Father. And you can't separate these things. Yet people want to do this. But see, the Lamb, who everyone said, well, the Jesus who was loving and accepting, he's also the Jesus who's judge. He's the Jesus who pours out his wrath. He's the judge he's the Jesus who's coming as a warrior. He's the Jesus who's going to speak, and he's going to slaughter the army of the beasts. And then you start to study the Old Testament. You begin to understand the Old Testament and the references, particularly of the reference to the angel of the Lord. That particular one, not an angel, but the angel of the Lord. You can start to understand that something else is going on here. For example, in Exodus chapter 2, the burning bush, it clearly says the angel of the Lord appeared in a burning bush, but then he doesn't speak as an angel. He speaks as God. And so, I am that I am. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He proclaims these things. And so you start to understand that, and most will hold to, that the angel of the Lord is what we classify as the pre-incarnate Christ. And yet, then you start looking at something, and it's one of those things. If I ask what was King David's greatest sin, most of us go right to Bathsheba. But if you really look at it, I think there was a sin that truthfully had greater consequences on the people. Yeah, the numbering of his soldiers. And then he was chosen. You got choices here. And David says, well, I'm going to go with the 3 days of plague. And when you look, who's in command of this plague? It's the angel of the Lord. And he's got a sword held out. And this is where he goes. Like, well, the temple being built where it was not a mistake. The temple's location was chosen particularly because that's where the angel of the Lord put his sword away during the plague. Because that's when he stopped and he put it away. And therefore, that's the threshing floor where David makes the offering, and he buys it, and that becomes the location. That was Jesus. He was executing judgment. And you got to remember, the same Jesus who was loving, what did he do? He's the one who flipped over the temples. or it's flipped over the temples, flipped over the tables in the temple. He just flips all the temples. Technically that's true, but just not in a literal sense here. This is the same Jesus. And so when they're singing the song of the Lambs, like, who should not fear your name, O Lord, and who shall not glorify your name? For you are holy. The nations come and worship before you. As I said, these are all there. Who shall not fear you? Who would not fear you? That's Jeremiah 10:7. For you alone are holy. That's in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel 2. The nations will come and worship. Isaiah 66, Psalm 86. Your judgments have been manifested. Psalm 98, Psalm 9. These are him revealing his judgments. And so this song is important to grasp and understand. It's not just a random song. It is made up, speaking of God's working, his judgment, his justice, and as is proclaimed. This is the song that he is singing. So with the song of the Lamb and the song of Moses concluded, he says, I look and I behold, and it's like the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. So we get here, it's the idea, and then he says, out of the temple came the 7 angels having 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, having their chests girded with golden bands. This is significant because of the other judgments that have really come, if you look at them, first it was the Lamb is given the scroll, and he opens the scroll. And those you can debate whether those are actually judgments, kind of thing, until the 6th one. But then you have the angels with the trumpets. They just seem to be there. It's like I looked, and there's the 7 angels with trumpets. But here you get these angels coming directly from the tabernacle. And their dress is significant as well, because when you look at their dress, the way they're dressed with the bright linen, pure bright linen, and chest girded with the golden bands. The white linens almost always typically represent God's righteousness. And it's with their righteousness, the significance of this is that these judgments, as horrible as they are, is they're not coming from a place of anger. They're not coming from a place of like God saying like, oh, I'm furious now, let me throw my lightning bolt. His judgments are coming from a place of righteousness. And I've said in the past in various places that people aren't offended by God's love. They're not offended by God's grace. They're not offended by his mercy. They're typically offended by his righteousness and his holiness. And why? Because if you look at a lot of the complaints that people will say against God, they're really going to stand against his justice. And that's really what the argument is. Even they consider one of the good arguments. They're like, well, is God either wholly good, or is he wholly good, or is he all powerful? That's usually the two that they try to play against him. Those two attributes. It's like if you're saying is God is all powerful, and yet wicked things happen, well then God can't be all good. But if you're saying that God is all good, and he's not stopping these wicked things, well then he must not be all powerful. And they're trying to play two things against each other, but ultimately what are they doing? They're setting themselves up as the judge. In other words, God's justice is not my justice. And therefore, if he's not meeting my justice, well then he's not good. But what are we seeing here? What is he doing? He's about to pour out his wrath, showing that, hey, he has the power to stop wickedness. And where is it coming from? It's coming from his righteousness. It's why usually the counter argument to it is like, when God did deal with wickedness, you really didn't like it. You complain about it. When God flooded the earth, you're saying, well, it's like, I don't like that. Well, that was God dealing with sin. And God is going to pour out his wrath again. And notice, as I said, these angels are coming from a place, since they're dressed in white, coming from the tabernacle. It is coming from God's righteousness. And God is a righteous judge. That's one of the things we always have to remember. And you'll see that claimed again, that true and just are his judgments. You're going to see that right in the middle of the judgments. The bowls are going to be poured out. And the song is like, true and just are your judgments, O Lord. And they're coming from that point. And yet, as they come out, it says the bowl's full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. Make no mistake, this is his wrath being poured out, the fullness of his wrath. The temple was filled with smoke and the glory of God and from his power. And no one is able to enter his temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. This is a throwback to the temple when it was built. If you remember, they offered, and Solomon offers up a grand prayer, and they're offering sacrifices and worship. And you can imagine, what do they want to do? They want to go in to the temple to hold the first service, and they can't, because the glory of God fills the temple to such the point, the smoke is so grand that they can't enter. No one can stop this. And so these judgments, this is showing, where is it coming from? It is coming from the very heart of God, from his righteousness, from his presence, from his glory. That is these judgments. And these judgments will make 2 things true, 2 things evident. One, that God in his holiness cannot stand sin, and he will punish sin. And 2, it is for his glory. That is one of the things that I think we can struggle with too. And it says, all things work together for good for those who love God and called according to his purposes. But all things will work for his glory. I think it's one of the hardest things that we will struggle to really surrender to. Then we say, I will do all things for his glory. Yet that is the call of the believer. Because that means if he wants me to suffer, then I'll do it for his glory. And I think that is difficult. There is one thing about the Apostle Paul's ministry that we often overlook. And Jesus, when he appeared, he said, look, I have shown him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. I said, that is the worst sales pitch ever. Because oftentimes, when people think about proclaiming the gospel, and one of the things about our modern culture is they almost want to proclaim the gospel. Here's what you get out of the deal. Like we're sales pitching it. Here's the good aspect of it. You follow Christ, and he's going to give you a better relationships. He's going to open the doors for you. He's going to set you free from just the guilt and the shame. You don't have to feel guilt or shame ever again. And yet, there's the other side. When you really look at the call, what did Jesus say? Count the cost to be my disciple.
Take up your cross.
Yeah, take up the cross. And now he says that at that time, and then what does Jesus visibly do in front of them? He took up the cross. Literally, they understood what that meant. And we're not talking, oh, look, I got to put up with this person beside me. That's my cross. No. They understood what a cross meant. The humiliation, the ultimate execution, the degradation that came with it. This is what it is. And so when he calls Paul, he's like, look, I'm going to show you how much you must suffer for my name's sake. And the scriptures haven't hid this at all. In the upper room, what did he say? He's like, look, when the world hates you, what does he make it clear? You're going to be hated for his name's sake. If you hold true. It hasn't been hidden here in Revelations. Like, what is the fate of the saints during that time in the ministry of the beast? They're going to seek you out. They're going to look to destroy you. They're going to look to execute you. They're going to look to get you to defame your Lord. But stand true. Be victorious. And for the saint, we go, why? It's because ultimately I want to live for his glory. And when it comes to these judgments, they too will be done for his glory. And yes, in the midst of our own suffering, when we've surrendered, it can be done for his glory. And ultimately, no matter what we go through at that point, there will be victorious. And I think we can join in the song of the saints. It's like, it was for his glory. That's what we desire to do. I think that, truthfully, is probably one of the hardest things that we can get into. Because we struggle with what we want is what we want. where we're like, well, I want the life. I want to work for this. And I want to enjoy this. But ultimately, it says, I want it for his glory. And that's why Paul writes the encouragements, like, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, do so to the glory of God. And to do it in the whole way. And it says the glory of God is being poured out. And there's going to be no hiding it. And when you look, and we'll touch on these final judgments here as well, you're going to see that the people, there's no denying it, where they're coming from. Like I said, if you looked at just the trumpet judgments, you can almost explain them away. And what do I mean by that? Is we've almost got the elements in place. Oh, look, all the grass is burning up.
That's global warming.
Yeah, that's climate change. We've messed up the atmosphere, that we've made it so weak that come in. The trees were, same thing. Fish are dying. Water's turning bitter. Yeah, that's just, it's the climate. Yeah, it's just climate. And you could explain this away. Yet when it comes to these people, and it says the sun starts to burn them, they curse. It's like, we know who's in control of these now. So it is God who's in charge of these things. And that's who we're going to come after. Why? Because they're going to see a difference here. Because these are particularly the vials of God's wrath, and they will hit the target of his wrath. And you'll see, even from the very first one, where it says, it went out, and it says, loathsome sores came upon men who had the mark of the beast. What does that mean? That means those who didn't take the mark, they're not hit. So you're going to see a direct distinction between the people of God and those who've chosen to be his enemies. And they know it as well. And when you look at, as I said, we'll compare these at some. There's not exactly identical one for one. But you can see a lot of these are the plagues of Egypt too, where God said, now I'm going to make a distinction between my people and the people of Egypt. And we're going to see that played out where God's like, I'm making a distinction between my people and those of the dragon. Why? Because my people are not appointed to wrath, but they still are. And they've chosen it. And remember, at that point, by this point in history, there's no one who hasn't chosen it. You've had the witnesses proclaiming their message for 3.5 years. We've looked and we've seen these angelic messengers who are coming. And what are they doing? They're giving a proclamation of the gospel. You got one who's declaiming woe on Babylon, and we'll get to that in a minute. What is Babylon? And you got the third one saying flat out, if you take this mark, this is the result of it. There's no hiding it. There's no mistaking. And so now it's going to be poured out, and they're going to know why. And the thing we remember is twofold here. One, from the song, that God is sovereign. And two, all that takes place, it is for his glory.